Welcome to Girl Read Your Bible, Sunday School for adults who missed it. I'm Nicole Woltz, your host for this podcast, brought to you by 522gals.com, a website dedicated to personal development and spiritual growth. Go and check it out. This week on Girl Read Your Bible, we are diving into a really interesting story that you have probably heard cited or referenced some point in your life, regardless of if you grew up in church or not. Today, we are talking about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. This story is found the beginning of this story is found in Genesis 18. And that's where we ended last time, was like midway through Genesis 18. And that is where we're picking up today. Now, just a rehash, we have some visitors. The Lord appears to Abraham, and he is with two others. We don't know, probably angels. And they are having a meal and they're having a conversation. And the Lord promises that this time next year, Sarah will have a child. And Sarah laughs because she's like, I don't think that's possible. And he says the phrase I know you wrote down and have pinned up on your wall somewhere in your life, that is anything too hard for the Lord. He is going to keep his promises. And so then they're kind of ending the conversation and they're leaving. And so we're starting in verse 16. The men get up from their meal and they look out towards Sodom. As they left, Abraham went with them to send them on their way. And that's where we're starting. Should I hide my plans from Abraham, the Lord asked? For Abraham will certainly become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. I have singled him out so that he will direct his sons and their families to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. Then I will do for Abraham all I have promised. And so as we're focusing on Abraham throughout this entire series, we really see the value, what God sees in Abraham, is that he's chosen because he knows he will raise and instruct his families to continue to follow in the way of the Lord. And that is incredible, because some of the things that we've seen play out in Abraham's life is that he carries incredible influence. And we saw that a couple chapters ago when everyone got circumcised as a covenant with the Lord. And as we talked about, in order to convince a large group of people to do something so painful and drastic, you must have be an incredible person of influence. So Abraham obviously carried himself well. He was in the favor of people around him. And God knew that this character was so incredible and unique. It's why he singled Abraham out. He knew he loved the Lord and that he would instruct those around him to also be righteous and just and follow in those footsteps. And that's really important, because I think that summarizes the entire character of Abraham right there, and why he is such a valuable historical figure, and what we can really take away and learn, because he was a real person, just like we're real people. And if he can carry that kind of influence and be that kind of righteous person, then so can you. So, I kind of hate this rhetoric where it's like, let me clarify. We are all flawed, right? But it doesn't just like, we all make mistakes. Oh, well, no, you can strive for righteousness. You will make mistakes, but then you get back up and you continue to strive for righteousness. It's not an excuse to misbehave, or, well, this is just how I am, or whatever the conversation goes. Is like, no, that's ridiculous. You actually do have the ability to strive for righteousness. And that's what we should all be doing. This is our big takeaway from Abraham. And as a result, Abraham is going to have a conversation with the Lord. And while the Lord is present in front of Abraham, I want to say for us, this is an example of prayer. He's having a conversation with the Lord, and that is what prayer is, a conversation with the Lord. So their conversation is about to begin, and then we're going to talk about it, because it's kind of an interesting conversation with some good takeaways. So Abraham says, so the Lord told Abraham, I have heard a great outcry from Sodom and Gomorrah because their sin is so flagrant. I am going down to see if their actions are as wicked as I have heard. If not, I want to know. And so we know that God knows, but it's one of those things where it was so awful and so evil and violent that it was just one of those things where you got to see it for yourself. Like, he knew, right? He already knows what's going on, but it's just I got to see it for myself. This is so incredible, in a bad way. This is so nefarious. The other men turned and headed towards Sodom, but the Lord remained with Abraham because he wanted to have this conversation. Abraham approached him and said, "Will you sweep away both the righteous and the wicked? Suppose you find 50 righteous people living in the city. Will you sweep it away and not spare it for their sakes? Surely you wouldn't do such a thing, destroying the righteous along with the wicked. Why, you would be treating the righteous and the wicked exactly the same. Surely you wouldn't do that. Should not the judge of all the earth do what is right?" So Abraham is clarifying and trying to understand and really prove that he's right about what he believes about the God he serves. The God I serve would not do that. The God I serve would not treat the righteous and the wicked the same. The God I serve wouldn't wipe out an entire city if there's 50 righteous people. Like, he's double checking, I think, it doesn't tell us what's actually going on in his head. This is my takeaway. So he's questioning the God that he is committed to serving and having this genuine conversation. I think it's also really cool that he wasn't afraid to have this conversation. It's not like keeping it a secret. Like, God knows what's in your heart already. He knows what you're already thinking. Have the conversation. See what the answer is in your spirit. In this case, Abraham gets to hear him out loud. So that's awesome. And the Lord replied, "If I find 50 righteous people in Sodom, I will spare the entire city for their sake." Then Abraham spoke again. "Since I have begun, let me speak further to my Lord, even though I am but dust and ashes." He's showing his humility. "Suppose there are only 45 righteous people rather than 50. Will you destroy the whole city for a lack of 5? And the Lord said, "I will not destroy it if there are 45. And so this continues. He's going to keep going down. Abraham's going to see where this magical number lands. And he goes down to 40. And the Lord says, "Nope, not 40. Suppose there's only 30. And the Lord says, "I will not destroy it if I find 30. And then Abraham, in verse 31, then Abraham said, "Since I have dared to speak to the Lord, let me continue. Suppose there are only 20. And the Lord replied, with patience, because that's how he loves us, "Then I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. Finally, Abraham said, "Lord, please don't be angry with me," because he knows at this point he's being a little badgering. "If I speak one more time, suppose only 10 are found there, 10 righteous men in the entire city. Will you spare the city for 10? And the Lord replied, "I will not destroy it for the sake of the 10. Then when the Lord had finished his conversation with Abraham, because there's more to the conversation, we don't get all the details, he went on his way, and Abraham returned to his tent. Let's talk about that conversation for a minute before we continue, because there's a lot of sermons preached on just those few scriptures and the back and forth with the Lord. Abraham was, like I said, really trying to understand and be certain that he was right about the Lord that he serves being a merciful and just God. And he is. And he said, "Yes, I will." Sometimes people look at that like he was bartering with God. He was changing the mind of God. He wasn't. God already knew what was going to happen. He already knew that there wasn't even going to be 10. But he was willing to have that conversation with Abraham. It illustrates the character and the patience of God and how he wants to answer our questions and wants to show up for us in that way and let him know, yeah, you're right. I wouldn't even do that. So later, Abraham's not questioning, well, I wonder how many righteous were left in the city. You know what I mean? I wonder how wicked the city really was, or, having that seed of doubt or what have you, if he had not had this conversation, wondering later all these things. But luckily, he trusted in his relationship with the Lord and had that conversation so that later he would know, no, God, Because as we know, right? Spoiler alert, the city is going to get wiped out. There was not even 10. So it's good that they had that conversation ahead of time. One of the things that, one of the takeaways from the scriptures, this conversation, is actually illustrating the mercy of God. And while some people, let's just be real, like this story can have a harsh tone. It does have a harsh tone. At the end of the day, this city is going to get wiped out. We'll read that in a minute. So sometimes people get a little, feeling that that's very unfair or unjust, or, wondering why God would do that. And get a little judgmental of God. Really, I'm trying to figure out the right way to word it. But let's just be real. Some people are getting a little judgmental of God that he would wipe out an entire city, or two, really, Sodom and Gomorrah. So there's a lot going on there. But this is also God saying, showing his patience, showing his, I want to go down and check this out. I can't, it's mind-boggling that it is this bad. There's been a great outcry against this city. That means a lot of prayers have gone up. A lot of pain has gone up. A lot of reports have gone up. And it's just something I have to know before I do this. It's like showing his own mercy. He already does know he's God. It's like, it's that seeing is believing kind of thing. It is that, it was so crazy, even though you knew, you had to see it for yourself, just in awe of how terrible that was. And we've all witnessed things like that, things you knew that was true, or you knew you'd heard of, and it's still hard to believe. The Holocaust comes to mind. It's so incredibly horrible that you just if you're visiting like maybe a museum or something like that, and just witnessing how horrible something is, it is true, but it's like seeing is just taking it to another level. So this is God. He's way above our ways. It's just the best way I can try to relate to what's happening here. The story is actually showing the mercy of God, because he's willing to have this conversation with Abraham, and also saying, yeah, I would spare the city for all the way down to 10. If we can find 10 righteous people, for the sake of those 10, I will spare the city, because I care about the righteous. I will protect the righteous. But then as it's going to play out, he's not going to spare the city, which is now letting us know that there were not even 10. Whew, mind-boggling. Anyhow, let's keep reading. So I know I reiterated that a lot there, because this story blows my mind. I'm just trying to think of something that incredibly evil that this was the punishment that's warranted, right? Like there's a lot of bad stuff that we'll read through as we go through the whole Bible. There's a lot of bad behaviors and whatnot. And this is the only one that gets, completely destroyed in this manner. So it is incredibly bad. That's just the point I want to illustrate. Going on to chapter 19, this is the actual destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. That evening, the two angels came to the entrance of the city of Sodom. Lot was sitting there, and when he saw them, he stood up to meet them. Then he welcomed them and bowed with his face to the ground. "My lords," he said, "come to my house to wash your feet and be my guest for the night. You may then get up early in the morning and be on your way again." "Oh, no," they replied. "We'll just spend the night here in the city square." But Lot insisted. So they went home with him, and Lot prepared a feast for them, complete with fresh bread made without yeast, and they ate it. But before they retired for the night, all the men of Sodom, young and old, came from all over the city and surrounded the house. They shouted to Lot, "Where are the men who came to spend the night with you? Bring them out so we can have our way with them." Girls, read it yourself. So let's stop and back up, because this is showing you this illustration of how incredibly vile this community, these people is. So let's start with a couple things. When the angels get to the city, Lot immediately sees them at the city gates. So I want you to know that that's telling us some things. If to be sitting at the city gates, that would have been like your main street, your city square kind of thing. But today, it would have been at the gates. That's where business transactions would have happened. That's where this council people or high up people in the town would have hung out and had conversations. This would have been like the hot spot. Remember, friends, there's no internet, there's no social media, there's not even newspapers. So this would have been the prime spot for all the goings on. And the fact that Lot is sitting there when they arrive tells us that Lot probably had some position of influence, that he was probably in the leadership or the upper, he was connected because he was sitting there when they arrived. And that's what it's illustrating for us. We don't know exactly the details of that, but there's a point to walk away with, that he was somebody of influence there. Could have been because he carried the influence of the Lord. He was still related to Abraham. He still knew, what he'd been surrounded with his entire life prior to entering Sodom and Gomorrah. Remember a few episodes ago, we talked about Abraham and Lot split their ways. Originally, they were all caravanning together to make this journey to the promised land. And their families weren't getting along. Their shepherds, their servants, whatever, were not getting along. There was too much. There was too many people and animals and things among them, and they split up. And Abraham had given Lot a choice of which direction he wanted to go, and he chose the greener pastures, and it was near the cities. And those cities were intoxicating for him and kind of pulled him in. Because see, the last time we saw Lot, he was in this lush land that he chose to go and separate from Abraham to have. And now we see him at the city gates. So that's telling us some things about Lot. He's been influenced to head towards the city and the city life and the conveniences there, but also to be surrounded by evil and to be okay with that because he's part of this community. He's not staying on the outskirts. He's joining in, and he's gonna, we'll see what else is happening. We'll see. But he also immediately recognizes them. And I think that's important too, because he wouldn't have been the only person at the city gates. Lots of people would have been at the city gates. As we see, because later, like, everyone knows that these men came in, these angels. But he recognizes them right away, which tells me, again, it's like giving us kind of like a read between the lines. There's takeaways there I don't want you to miss. We see him at the city gates, so we know he has high up in the community, has a role in the community, and he recognizes these angels right away. He bows to them. He invites them in his home. He says, I'll wash your feet. Washing feet in those days, also, this is a side note for you, that would have been a customary and polite thing to do because everybody's walking around in the sand and the dirt and their feet are always dirty. So, it was a treat, it was a common practice. It wasn't like special, but to go in and wash your feet when you enter a home would have been a normal practice. I think it still should be. It sounds like a great idea. Just keeping everything clean. In any case, so he's inviting them in that way. It's illustrating that he recognizes that they are special, maybe that he understands that they are spiritual beings. He understands that they are from the presence of the Lord because he bows to them, calls them Lord. So I think that's giving us some insight into things, the conflict of Lot. And why I tell you all that, why that's important to me, is because I think a lot of us actually can see ourselves in Lot a little more than we can see ourselves in Abraham. Our goal is to be able to see ourselves in Abraham and have those similar characteristics. But I see a lot of people struggling with the spirit of Lot. And he was raised, he was surrounded by the righteousness and the goodness. He saw the Lord show up for Abraham. He understands and knows. Abraham was the closest thing he had to a son. He was his closest relative for so long in that way. So he would have had a deep relationship with him. He would have been instructed. We said this is why the Lord chose Abraham, is because he knew he would raise his family in the ways of righteousness and just and to do what is right. And so he's obviously already modeled this. And so Lot has had a lot of exposure to the goodness of God and still found himself drawn to the convenient, sinful city. And he's stuck there. He's honoring these angels when they enter. So he knows things, but he's still entertaining and being a part of a vile community. And I think that that's a lot of takeaways that can get really deep for us if we can recognize in the areas in which we kind of do these things. And maybe that's a wake-up call to be more intentional about your own character. It is for me. It's like, where am I looking more like Lot than I am looking like Abraham? And how can we make changes to not do that? Because it's not the character you want to follow. This is not the historical figure you want to identify with. But we're going to keep going. So, because we're at the really bad part. So this nightfall has come, and all the men of the city, this is all the men of the city, young and old, show up, start knocking on the door, and they're like, send out those guys that came in so we can do bad things. They think that's as much of an illustration as they need to give us on how corrupt and vile this city is and the people there. That is a wild and disgusting, I can't even. But so Lot stepped outside to talk with them, shutting the door behind him, blocking that barricade so they don't rush past him. It's probably foresight. Please, my brothers, he begged. See, again, he's relating with these people. Don't do such a wicked thing, acknowledging he knows it's wicked. They don't, though, because they're okay with their wickedness. They don't see anything wrong with it. Look, I have two. This is messed up. This verse 8, very troubling. It's in here. We're going to talk about it. Look, I have 2 virgin daughters. Let me bring them out to you so you can do with them as you wish. But please leave these men alone, for they are my guests and under my protection. So stop. I got to stop there because that one's so... Okay. And this is what cracks me up too. All these people that say, oh, I read the Bible in a year. I'm like, really? You didn't get held up on any of the weird stuff? Because that one's pretty weird. So here's some different thoughts behind that. It could have been that Lot was trying to buy time. It could have been that his daughters are engaged and he thinks maybe their fiancés will stand up for them and protect them. So it could be that he already knows what type of lust these men have and know that they're not interested, and they would just say, this would be a deterrent for them. Or there could have been a lot of reasons he did that. Not okay in any form. Don't really care what the reason is. It was just messed up. That's just the way it is. I'm not making any excuses for him. I'm just telling you there might be something we're missing here, because that is a incredibly awful thing to this is an awful verse. I can't figure that one out completely. I've read up on like what in the world, and so that was some of the suggestions was like, maybe he thought they would be protected by their fiancés. Maybe he thought the men would appreciate the offer, but they're not interested because that's not their desire or lustful nature is not to be interested in those women. I have no idea. This is just showing you the vast corruptness, again, even with Lot, that he would even make that offer. It is very important in Jewish culture, the covenant, the threshold covenant, when somebody crosses into your door, you are responsible for them as if they are your family. So when he says these men are under my protection, that is completely accurate. That would have been a really important covenant. However, his daughters would be also under his protection and an important covenant. They are his actual bloodline. So it's a weird scenario. I'm just reporting what's actually in there. We have discussed it. And we are going to move on because we're talking about Sodom and Gomorrah. Everything is so messed up, the whole city is going to get destroyed. So obviously there's a lot of gross and weirdness coming out of this story, and that's just where we're at. We're on verse 9 now. Stand back, they shouted. This fellow came to our town as an outsider. They're turning on Lot now. And he's acting like our judge. We'll treat you far worse than the other men. And they lunged towards Lot to break down the door. But the angels reached out, pulled Lot into the house, and bolted the door. They then blinded all the men, young and old, who were at the door of the house. So they gave up trying to get inside. They caused a distraction. Meanwhile, the angels questioned Lot. Do you have any other relatives in the city? They asked. Get them out of this place. Your sons-in-law, your sons, daughters, anyone else, any relatives. For we are about to destroy the city completely. The outcry against this place is so great it has reached the Lord, and he has sent us to destroy it. So Lot rushed out to tell his daughter's fiancés, quick, get out of the city. The Lord is about to destroy it. But the young men thought he was joking. This is not when, after all those people just went blind, was struck with blindness, and these angels are here, and there's this commotion in the town. I can't comprehend for a second why these men didn't take this very seriously. But again, showing their complete disregard for God or spiritual things. When Lot still hesitated, I skipped a part. So now we're on verse 15. At dawn the next morning, the angels became insistent. Hurry, they said to Lot, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here. Get out right now, or you will be swept away with the destruction of the city. When Lot still hesitated, the angel seized his hand and the hands of his wife and 2 daughters and rushed them to safety outside the city, for the Lord was merciful. He waited. I think this is really powerful, and we'll come back to, I want you to remember this verse 16. When Lot still hesitated, the angel seized his hands and took them to safety. Run for your life. When they were safely out of the city, one of the angels ordered, run for your lives and don't look back or stop anywhere in the valley. Escape to the mountains or you will be swept away. Oh no, my Lord, Lot begged. You have been so gracious to me and saved my life. And you have shown me such kindness, but I cannot go up to the mountains. It's telling us something else about Lot. Disaster would catch up with me there, and I would soon die. See, there is a small village nearby. Please let me go there instead. Don't you see how small it is? Then my life will be saved. This is telling us probably how Lot ended up in Sodom and Gomorrah, because he had that lush, nice area, we talked about. And he has ended up here in the city. He likes the conveniences. He doesn't like the, the camping lifestyle. So he's like, if I go up into the mountains, I'm not going to make it. I am not a man's man. I'm going to need some comfort things. So there's a small village over here, and if you can let me go there, then I'll be okay. It's just a little village. It can't be that bad. It's basically what he's saying. And they agree. All right, the angel said, I will grant your request. I will not destroy the little village, but hurry, escape to it, for I can do nothing until you arrive there. This explains why it's known as Zorah, which means little place. Lot reached the village just as the sun was rising over the horizon. Then the Lord rained down fire and burning sulfur from the sky on Sodom and Gomorrah. He utterly destroyed them, along with the other cities on the village plain, wiping out all the people and every bit of vegetation. Everything was destroyed. But Lot's wife looked back as she was following behind him, and she turned into a pillar of salt. And we have to stop there because this is the reference, right? We've heard that cliche, or we've heard that quoted, and we've heard Lot's wife referenced. even Jesus references Lot's wife. In Luke 17, verse 32, he says, "Remember what happened to Lot's wife. If you cling to your life, you will lose it. If you let your life go, you will save it." And he is teaching on the second coming. He's teaching on the coming of the Son of Man, which is himself. And so he references this story, and that makes this story extra important. I think if Jesus talked about it, it makes it really important that we know and understand it all the more. And so this is just this one sentence that we get. There's so much takeaway, though. But Lot's wife looked back, and as she was following behind him, and she turned into a pillar of salt. So there must be more to the story, because Lot hesitated, and the angels grabbed all their hands, and dragged them out of the city. Led them, guided them, however you want to say it, got them out. They did this because the Lord is merciful, and he made an agreement with Abraham. And Abraham asked for Lot to be protected. They gave him time. They gave Lot and his family time. They said, go and tell all of your family, any relatives. Lot's wife would have likely had family, potentially had family in Sodom. Lot's wife isn't mentioned prior to him going, prior to this story. So we can guess that maybe she was from there. We can guess that she had friends there, family there, maybe a business there. Who knows? This was their community for a very long time. And she liked the darkness she was surrounded in. She was okay with it. This place was so incredibly vile, it needed to be destroyed, wiped off, so it didn't infect the rest of the earth, really, so that this behavior and mindset didn't spread. That's why it needed completely wiped out, okay? It's because this can infect other towns and make the world a much darker place much faster. I think that's the purpose and intent of the wipeout. In any case, Lot's wife hesitates also, and her consequence is grave. She is turned into a pillar of salt. And that's interesting because if you look it up, there's some findings, some archaeological findings where there are some people who are pretty convinced that they have found the pillar. They have found what they call Lot's wife. They're convinced that this is the place. There's scorching of the ground. There's high levels of sulfur. So there's a lot of archaeological evidence that points to this particular area being Sodom and Gomorrah, and this particular pillar being once Lot's wife. So she just looked back. She was just like, oh, she was feeling nostalgic for a minute and was greatly punished in that way. I doubt it, friends. This is God showing mercy repeatedly throughout the story. He showed mercy when he had a conversation with Abraham and said, I won't destroy it for 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10. I am a righteous God. I am merciful. I care and I am patient. That is why I'm willing to have this conversation with you so that you understand that. So I will protect Lot and his family, not because they necessarily deserve it, but because of their relationship with you and your relationship with me. And so the angel said, you got to go. You got to get out. And Lot hesitates. His family hesitates. And they still grab him by the hands and pull him out. There's been so much mercy throughout the entire story. Sometimes we miss the big picture. God's showing his mercy the entire time. So when she looks back, it probably wasn't. This is me talking. It probably wasn't with nostalgia like, oh my goodness, look what's happening there. No, probably not. It was probably looking back like, I want that more. I want that. With longing, I wanted that life. What we're about to go into, I'm not interested in. I'm not interested in mountain life and being spared. I wanted that. And even though it's getting wiped out, and even though it's gone, and even though they said they were going to take it down, she looked back with desire, wanting that life. And that is illustrating for us sinful nature, right? So when you've come over into the life of God and the life of Jesus and the faith, and you are committed to striving for a righteous life and to live better and to follow the ways of the Lord and to do what is right. Sometimes people have a real struggle with different temptations, and we all struggle with temptation to a point. We all struggle with making mistakes or whatever. This was different. This was a longing for that life back, and that life was gone. So she got the same consequences of the other people who had also chosen to stay, who had not listened. Look, guys, the rumor mill was pretty fast and pretty hard. That's why everybody already knew that those angels were in Lot's house. That's why everybody already knew and came to the door. That's why we see what happens in these towns with this news traveled fast. And when Lot went to his daughter's fiancés and said, God is going to destroy this town, we have got to get out of there. And they said, oh, he's only joking. I promise you they spread that rumor. I promise you they shared that information. I promise you the people in the town knew this was coming. That they knew that this was said, that this was coming. I doubt that they believed it, or that would be really stupid to say. That's the point, is that they didn't believe it, and they couldn't fathom that was any kind of reality. And it didn't really matter, because this was the life they wanted. And Lot's wife, who's never named, just Lot's wife, we'll call her Salty, she looks back longing for that life and wanting that more than what God has ahead of her, what God could give her, what abundant, blessed future she could have if she put her faith in the Lord. She wanted that life, and she got it. She got the exact consequences if she hadn't left, because she was turned into a pillar of salt. So she was essentially getting the same consequences of the people who were there, who suffered, fire and brimstone. This is legitimately fire and brimstone. And so that's our takeaway of don't look back to the life that you left with longing. There's so much good things potentially ahead of you if you just stay the path, if you focus on the right standing. Lots of takeaways from Lot's wife. But even the fact that she's referenced by Jesus, it's important to know that in the entirety of that story. And we're going to keep reading. Abraham got up early that morning and hurried out to the place where he had stood in the Lord's presence, because remember, they could see Sodom from there. He looked out across the plain towards Sodom and Gomorrah and watched as columns of smoke rose from the cities, smoke like smoke from a furnace. But God had listened to Abraham's request and kept Lot safe, removing him from the disaster that engulfed the cities on the plain. And that's when Abraham knew that there weren't even 10. There wasn't even 10 righteous. And so I hope that you got a lot out of this story. I know I belabored some of the points because it is pretty deep and it's a pretty harsh story. So I do find it a little challenging to talk about and share. Let's be real. The whole wiping out of an entire city, that seems, that is hard to correlate with the goodness of God, that the loving God that we talk about, that we believe in, that's how I describe God. And so seeing something so rash as, rash is the wrong word, seeing something so enormous as destroying these cities and everything in it, it's a big deal. And it's like, okay, let's understand, because I still know that God is just and righteous. So this is where the conversation that he'd had with Abraham is very helpful, of saying like, no, I'll spare the city for 10. I care. I don't want this to happen. I don't want this to be true. I'm coming down to check it out because it's so mind-boggling that in fact it is true. I had to see for myself. I don't want this to be real. I don't want this to be true, but it is. And having that mercy and that conversation and the illustration of how it's okay for us to have those conversations with God, things that we're thinking about and things that we're like, sometimes people are like afraid to say certain things to God. He already knows. This is not a mystery. It's not a secret. Say it out loud. Get it out. Have the conversation. Say, God, I'm confused about this. Like, bring wisdom to my mind. Bring wisdom to my soul, and let me know that you've got this covered. That you're really showing up. That you hear me in this. That show me where your justice is. Show me where your mercy is, and He will. He will show up. Often not in the way that we expect or think or want, but He does, and shows Himself merciful and good over and over. So even in this story where this entire city is being wiped out, they had opportunities to change. They had opportunities to leave. They had opportunity to believe the report that said this city is going to get wiped out. We should probably, they had no fear of the Lord. If they had any faith, any fear of the Lord in any way, the showing up of the angels, the blinding of the chaotic protesters at Lot's house, the rumor mill spinning from Lot's son-in-laws, potential betrothed son-in-law. They weren't son-in-laws. They weren't married yet, but all of that would have, those are just showing just different ways where if they had any kind of faith at all, any kind of fear of the Lord, any kind of belief in anything, where they would have listened to those or heeded that warning, and they didn't do any of that. And Lot's own wife, who saw the angels show up, who had them touch and grab her by the hand and take her out of the city with her family, and still looked back and wanted that life, showed how corrupt she was inside, that she still didn't even want good things ahead. She still would have rather had that. She looked back longingly for things that were evil, and it just shows a corrupt line. And so that is the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and how we can see God's incredible mercy and patience even in the story where things did not work out and went really bad. So I would like for you guys, before next time, to read your Bible. I want you to read the story of Sodom and Gomorrah for yourself. Don't miss a thing. And I want you to continue through the rest of the chapter, because I am not going to go with that one with you guys. It's a lot of incest and some weirdness, and it just is letting you know. I'm just going to let you know. This one is just giving you the further illustrating the corruption of the family of Lot, and how their minds have just been so polluted by the environment that they were in, that they do these things that you can read about for yourself there in the rest of chapter 19. And from their actions will come two important clans, the Moabites and the Ammonites, which will be in the future enemies of Israel, and there'll be constant problems with these other tribes that are actually descendants. They're actually all related, again from Abraham, because they would have been through Lot's seed. And it's a pretty messed up story. So I'm going to let you guys read that one yourself. And the next time we will start in Genesis chapter 20. Until next time, girl, read your Bible.